Those are the dudes that are out there eating people, like dressing in costumes and killing children. Like these are the dudes that are actually like doing the shit that we're all like should be terrified of. The stuff that's made of nightmares, you know, like the immigrants that are running drugs across the country to make a living. Yeah, that's not great. But the stuff that's like you're terrified of your kid landing in somebody's hands, that's some fucking lonely white guy somewhere in like the Midwest. So
it puts the lotion in the basket.
What's up, y'all? Welcome back to the Before You Speak podcast. I am your host, Derek Peterson, just drinking from the fire hose of my news feed and, breaking it down with this guy.
Hey, thanks, Derek. I'm Elwyn, and also drinking from the fire hose of my news feed, which this week feels like it's filled with ice and Davos snow.
Yeah, dude. Some of the stuff coming out of this World Economic Forum is interesting. What the French guy, that was some of the that rolled out in shades and came across.
I didn't see that guy.
There's some great clips if you go back and watch it, but I'll let you start off with our current events today. You want to jump into the Minnesota church protest and give us your thoughts on this? This stuff is crazy. So
yeah, like we're gonna talk, I'm sure, about what's going on in Minnesota later in this episode, but last week there was this protest at a church. A bunch of sort of anti-ICE protesters went in. I don't know, rather aggressively. I don't think there was any real physical violence of it, but they certainly went in and took over a church service at a church in Minnesota. And the reason they did that was because
this was the Don Lemon protest, right?
Don Lemon was there live streaming it.
Yeah.
And the reason they did this protest was because the pastor or one of the pastors at the church is apparently like an ICE field head field officer. So they wanted to call attention to that and disrupt that and whatever. And like the reason I wanted to talk about this, the reason this stuck out to me is because in hearing the coverage of it, I just heard a lot of this kind of differing feelings about it that I think are really interesting when we think about how the right and the left look at what's going on in Minnesota through just a completely different lens. Because, look, I'm on the left and I'm in favor of protests. I think this protest was stupid. Let people go to church. Let people go and have their time worshiping together. That's usually family time that people don't get a lot of during the week. That is, a sacred time, not to like use the word, but like that is time people hold dear. It's something they look forward to. It's something that we should all respect and stay out of. Let people do it. It's okay. So to go in and protest it in the manner that they did, it's distasteful to me because I don't think it's the right place for protest, but it also gives just an easy propaganda win to the other side. Where now you got the right going like, look at these crazy, this is not peaceful. They're screaming inside a church, blah, 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 blah. And I think the left always, when it comes to protests, you really have to hold yourself to a very, very high standard. And any unforced error is going to be blown way, way, way out of proportion. And people are not going to be on your side when they see video of you messing up a church protest. But the thing that got me, riled up about it and why I wanted to talk about it was send ICE inside a church to go get a guy that they have a belief is here illegally. And the right's all for it. We have ICE patrolling church parking lots and school parking lots and all these places that should be fairly off limits. And the right is completely fine with that. And the best sort of analysis I heard was, well, churches shouldn't be used as sanctuaries for criminals. And I mean, I guess if we're talking about a murderer, that's one thing. But something that I have not noticed is, pictures of dozens of undocumented immigrants sleeping in churches to escape ICE enforcement.
Yeah. And by that logic, are we just abolishing the Catholic Church now? Like, what's going on?
Yeah. And the scope of power, the scope of what the right is willing to accept from state police, from armed agents of the state, where they're willing to allow them to go and where they're allowing protesters to go is so completely different. The power dynamic is so out of whack here,
Yeah.
right? Like those protesters were shitbags. They were doing something I don't agree with. Maybe they're not shitbags, but they were doing a protest in a manner that I don't think is effective or smart. Okay. But they're not carrying guns. They're not carrying pepper spray. They don't have the full backing and the absolute immunity of the entire federal government behind them.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I might be on the other side of this just in general of and not to say that doing this stuff can't be distasteful, but dude, there is a level that you get to with some of this stuff that you are just when you've seen enough, you've seen enough. Like and the fact that the pastor was connected to ICE and the fact that this wasn't like a random church, meaning like there was a connection to protesting this specific church from my understanding. For me, that part of it, because dude, I'll be honest, man, like I've been watching those videos and I've been trying to watch stuff that like people are posting from both sides in essence to be like, oh, this is, you know, why I should be able to do what it's doing. And I'm like, yeah, I'm sorry, man. I look, even Mark Carney's speech, which I wanted to talk about in a minute, like even like the overall theme of kind of what he was saying was like, look, if when you are just compliant with little things, those little things like add up to big things. And I look, if churches are off limits, cool, but so should be abducting 5-year-olds and sending them across the country. So should be ripping, elderly out of their house, elderly US citizens out of their house with no clothes on in the freezing cold and dragging them to a detention center only to return them a few hours later when they prove that they're a citizen. Like, this is not the America that we built. And so
No,
yeah,
sorry, I agree with all that. Like I
yeah,
don't my but I think that to me there's a layer of reality, fair or unfair,
yeah,
that just has to sit over all this, which is that the slightest indiscretion or the slightest discretion from norms by protests on the left are going to be used by the right in just this incredibly outsized way. Like in 2020, there were some protests that got way out of hand where we're talking about burning buildings,
yeah,
but the majority of them were really peaceful.
yeah,
And it just if you're not if you're pro this government, if you're anti-left protesters, then it doesn't matter. The principles go out the window, and I think your principles are right on. I happen to agree with them. I just think that the protesters on the left have to always be holding this reality, which is if we fuck up even a little, then we're gonna lose 10x for every 1x that we might win in a protest. And
yeah.
it's fundamentally unfair, but they gotta know the rules by now.
I know it sounds like when you talk to just about every person that's like getting ready to go through a divorce, like there's one party that is literally like holding all of it together and they're just like about to break. But if they overreact in like one way, the other party just like loses their crap. And there's just a history of it. So the party that has been losing their crap for years is it's just accepted that that's okay. And then when people finally, start to like do things that are similarly unwarranted, uh, it gets blown out of proportion, and that's the part of this that I'm like, yeah, sure, protesting a church is distasteful, but it's not nearly as distasteful as the other stuff that's going on.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to necessarily ridicule people for that. And I understand the logic that you're explaining. I just think the logic is stupid now. Like
No, but
we've seen enough bad shit from the people in charge. Like we're months away from what they're going to start making us wear armbands to identify ourselves as citizens, and who's a citizen and who's not a citizen. Like like when does this start?
and to be clear, like, I think that my objection to this whole thing is less the protest in the church and much more the lack of consistency
Mm,
in, if we're gonna hold this church service as something that cannot be violated, by protesters on the left, then you have to hold churches and places like schools as places that can't be violated by the jackbooted thugs doing the government's bidding. And the people who are crying about the protest in the church saying that it was so out of line,
Yeah.
they're the same ones that are cheerleading the abduction of 5-year-old kids.
Yeah.
And the so
I'm with you on
that's
that.
more my general point.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I agree. Like, meaning, like, if we're going to set a standard, then let's set a standard. And,
That's right.
like, if you don't want us protesting churches, then yeah, don't send your agents into churches. Like,
Yeah.
we're cool. We'll leave it there. I'm curious, have you caught up on any of the stuff that's going on with the World Economic Forum?
Beyond, I heard some clips of Mark Carney's speech and just the generally humiliation of the United States on an international stage by our president. Uh, Not too much.
Man, the difference between those two speeches, I couldn't even get through Trump's speech. Like, I can't listen to the guy talk for more than 5 minutes before I'm like, dude, you are just stringing together like word soup. I have no idea what you're talking about half the time. Uh, but like just the difference of like the feeling of like an adult in the room. And I miss, I miss having an articulate president. I miss having somebody that was inspirational, that was unifying, that somebody that really felt like they were bringing our country back together. And I think the theme that I see coming out of all of the everything that's happening at this forum is just that the world is uniting behind our back, like, and not behind our back, clearly in front of us. They're just, going around us now, creating deeper relationships. Europe's opening up to China more. There's so much going on that because of the policies we're making that we've spent, decades defending against. And these are great trade partners. And the result of it is that, the foreign policy is so bad that what Trump is doing may end up being a necessity, because the only way to get people to work with us and get what we need in the future may be to take it by force, because our trade policy has been so awful. And the tariffs, the economic warfare, like all this stuff, man, it's just, I'm so over it, because it's not necessary, and it's not our place in the world. We have leadership that just keeps talking like the Western Hemisphere is ours. It belongs to us. And anything that we touch or want should just, flow to the United States, because we are the world power and deserve it. And dude, I spent my life, my entire childhood, around people that were bullies and had that same logic. And I have such a visceral reaction when people just think that they're entitled to anything that you have because they like it. And the instinct is to just fight back, and I can't stand it. And I hate the fact that I'm part of the group that is the bully. You know what I mean? I hate the fact that I don't feel represented to the world right now, because we're the ones causing the problems. And man, it just sucks to be in that place. Like, the US, as crappy as the US has been at times throughout history, we've also really shown up in a lot of meaningful ways for people in the world in other areas. And we've essentially, what it feels like, diminished most of the good we are doing in the world. We've essentially cut almost all of it out. And now we are there does come a point, I feel like, people start to look at all of this and say, yeah, when do we start fighting back? Like,
Yeah.
when do we say that we're not okay with this anymore?
Yeah, I think there was a tweet I saw this week that said basically, Americans are not prepared and don't realize how much the rest of the world hates us right now. And I feel like that's probably true. Uh, we are just resorting to schoolyard bullying. That's what Venezuela is. That's what Greenland, although he apparently chickened out on Greenland. Uh,
Well, yeah, because there was a small show of power, a small show of unity,
right.
where
Yep.
Europe was like, no, we're not going to just allow this to happen.
I echo your sentiment. I mean, I am embarrassed by, what this country is doing, uh, and who we elected in. It on the internet, it is embarrassing. I don't know any other way to say it. And every time that guy gets up to speak, it's funny you said you can't listen to him speak. Lisa hadn't listened to him speak in like 6 months, and listened to part of his speech, and I just hear like, "Oh my god, I can't believe I got to stop. This is just." Uh, but I do think that what will, we have too much purchasing power, to really have people go tell us to fuck off completely. We just buy too much shit.
Yeah.
And but what this is doing, and what Mark Carney I think was really what was interesting about his speech was he was basically saying, look, this has all worked a certain way for 50 years, and we all said it worked one way, but we all know that there was shit going on in the background. We would take some shit from the United States, and you know, because we got a lot from them also. And there was this lie that everybody knew was a lie and that worked for everybody. And he basically said that lie isn't being told anymore, and it doesn't work for us anymore. And there is going to be, I think the way we get hurt is there will ultimately be a reshuffling of purchasing power. I can only imagine that China is sitting there going like, hey
Well,
guys,
yeah,
we're
that's what I'm saying. That's what's happening. The world
yeah.
is, like, yeah, it's like, like a woman in a bad marriage or a guy in a bad marriage, like you oftentimes you start the process of exiting before you kill the relationship. You if you're smart about it, like you move some funds out of here, you like make sure you got your job secured or whatever the situation is, and I feel like that's what the world's doing. We're about to go through a divorce, and the world is reshuffling and like, all right, well, we can't cut America out yet because we still need them for some things, but we can purchase these here, we can get this here, and they're reshuffling their deck all across the board until they have the power to say like, all right, if you are going to do this, then screw off. We don't need you
Yeah,
at all
or
anymore
until China has the power to
to
do
do it.
something, because I
Yes.
suspect one of the things that's really nice that China's got to be sitting there very happy about is, if nothing else, what we have shown the world is that every 4 years we're capable of electing a psychopath who will
Yeah.
tear everything down, and that's a level of fundamental inconsistency that China doesn't offer. China's going to be like, yeah, we're communists, but guess what? You know what we're going to do. We have a whole 5 decade, 5 year plan and a decades long plan, and we'll show it to you. And yep, it involves shitty workers conditions, but we're going to sign some trade agreements with you, and we're going to abide by them. And those guys over across the sea, you know I mean, their current president, in 2030, their current president might seem like a nice guy, but who's coming next?
Well, dude, that's what they're already saying has happened. They're saying a lot of what's going on. Out of everything that's going on, China is the winner because a lot of the economic sanctions that China faced across the world are now being lifted, and people are willing to buy their EVs. They're willing to buy their products and bring them into their countries now with stipulations, which before they blocked a lot of that for those exact reasons. And that's all starting to shift. And a large part of that's due to America. So,
Yeah.
like, but well, let's move on from that because I feel like I'm just getting angrier and I need to be I need to save some of it for our topic today. So
Probably going to get worse before it gets
yeah,
better, man.
I was gonna say I think that's
Beatings will continue until morale improves.
well, even just in the next like 20 or 30 minutes, this could escalate. So let's see how this goes. But today we're talking about immigration. Uh, I did a little bit of family research this week on my own family's immigration, which, we didn't know a ton about, but it was actually really interesting to go back through it. So my grandpa immigrated here from Sweden, and then you have family that immigrated here as well, correct?
My mother immigrated from the Netherlands. My grandparents before that from on my father's side, but my mother is the closest. I'm technically first generation.
Wow. The so what was your do you know the history and the reasoning behind some of that?
It wasn't dramatic or anything like that. It was not. This was in the mid '60s, and being in Europe in the mid '60s, still coming out, still really recovering from World War II, and the Netherlands was, they they were in the middle of some stuff, just being right next to Germany. I think it was just pure opportunity,
Yeah.
but it is a very American story, where she came over by herself. I mean, she still has the trunk that went on the boat with her. She did not have a whole lot of money. She, moved into New York, got a job, got another job, met my father, and ultimately became a very, very successful uh, businesswoman. Opened up a store in the town next door to where we lived, ran that store for 30 years, was a fixture in the community, knew everybody around, and built a successful life for her and her husband and kids. Uh, coming off the boat from Europe. To me, it's like it is a classic American story.
Yeah. Dude, that's cool. Yeah, my grandpa's story was interesting. So like I learned a lot about it this week. So my great grandpa apparently was promised land by the Mormons. And so they brought my grandpa and his brother over when they were 3 and 5, and apparently my great grandma either passed away on the trip making the trek across or shortly after they arrived in the US. They Shortly after they got here, within a few years, the Mormon bishop that had promised my grandpa or had given my grandpa land and parceled it out, or my great grandpa ended up stealing it back from them, which caused my my great grandpa to I think move farther west. So they ended up uh, moving all the way towards Utah, where my great grandpa ended up marrying another woman who was apparently terrible, and my grandpa and his brother ended up getting locked out of the house. The woman hated them so much that they were on their own when they were 11 and 15, or 13 and 15. These I'm piecing together stories from like my different family members that have told me this, but apparently my grandpa and his brother were living in the woods for a period of time until they joined what was the coalition that would like build roads and stuff like that. There was a
Oh, like
union.
during the New Deal.
Yeah. And so they ended up joining that to just to have food on the table and a roof over their head. And then apparently my grandpa met my grandma, and my grandma was Mormon at the time. So my grandpa, even after what happened to his dad with his land getting taken from him, still married my grandma into the Mormon church, which, years later they ended up, I don't think my grandparents were very active after that. It all kind of fell apart. But yeah, my grandpa's name is on Ellis Island.
Oh, that's
My
cool.
Yeah, my daughter's name is Ellis, and we tell people that's one of the reasons why we named her Ellis, but that's partially a lie because really my ex-wife was just binge watching Grey's Anatomy during her pregnancy and decided that she loved the name Ellis, which is the main doctor's mother's name. So, like, cool.
It's right before I met Lisa, she had been doing a lot of work on ancestry.com, uh, tracing her lineage, and she found, the signatures in Ellis Island. And one of the first, we've been dating for long enough for me to go to a family event. And one of the first ones I went to was a like reunion of a bunch of people that she had found and said, all in the New York tri-state area, and said, let's go here. You guys haven't seen each other for 30, 40 years, maybe ever. Uh, but we're all descendant of the same family. And yeah, it's kind of interesting.
Dude, it's crazy, man. So I learned through this process. One, my grandpa and his brother had a sister that didn't come over with them. So I actually probably still have family, like distant family in Sweden somewhere. And that they changed our last name too. So our last name was spelled differently, still Peterson or something like that, but the spelling was very Swedish. I think it was spelled with like Pettersson. So they Americanized it when they got here. So I'm actually kind of curious to jump in. I may jump into some of that in the months to come to kind of like, you know, it'd be
Yeah.
interesting if I have some, giant blonde hair, blue eyed family
Someone who can get you citizenship in another country.
I didn't fully say it, but I was probably headed there. So we intentionally started this conversation today with those stories because we wanted to connect to the fact that we're two adult white men that live in the United States, and we came from immigrants. Like, immigration was a core part of just even who we are, even though it might have felt distant and may not have felt distant to us and may not have impacted our lives directly at the moment. It was a key factor in us being here in this moment. And so I think that's important for people to recognize. And I think almost everybody in the United States has a similar story to those at some point within the last 100 years to 150 years. So, we are all connected through immigration in some way, shape, or form, unless you're Native American. You know what I mean? And so I think that's an important factor to shape the conversation that we're going to have today as we jump into some of the logistical stuff of what's going on in our country with immigration at the moment. So I think I wanted you to, where do you want to start with? You want to start with, I don't know what this is. What is the Riley Act?
Sure. So I'll go back a little bit, not very
Mhm.
far, because you can always go back farther. But I think, the 2024 election there were probably three real big things that decided that election, and immigration was absolutely one of them, if not the biggest thing.
Yeah.
Because Joe Biden did have, for at least for the first couple of years, he did have a rather open borders policy, and there were an awful lot of people that came into the country in an undocumented manner. And, you know, as at a core level, I don't think it's wrong to say whatever immigration policy we have, we want to know who's coming in to the country.
Yeah.
We want to vet people, and we do reserve the right to say, no, if you're a terrorist, you're not coming in. Or, some people would say if you're a communist, you're not coming in. Or, we have the right to have some policy like that. The 2024 election, big reaction to Biden on immigration. The Lake and Riley Act is Lake and Riley was you know, a young, white, pretty blonde girl who was murdered fairly brutally by an undocumented Hispanic immigrant. Perfect. It's a perfect setup, right? So
Hmm.
they passed this act, which is known as the Lake and Riley Act. And the biggest part of it, the biggest thing that it does is it says that any undocumented immigrant can be held indefinitely through the duration of their immigration proceeding based on an accusation. So if you're arrested and accused of burglary or accused of theft, the accusation itself is enough to say, cool, we're going to detain you until your immigration status and your immigration proceeding is completed. Well, that's often years, right? So
Yeah.
this is a really long time of detention based upon an accusation. Not There's no innocent until proven guilty. And you know, it is worth noting that undocumented immigrants are subject to most of the protections of the US Constitution, including the protection of due process, that you are innocent until proven guilty, that the state has a burden to prove what they accuse you of doing, and they can't just throw you in jail because they accuse you of something. Uh, there's pretty wide margins around all of that, no matter who you are, I think. But the Lake and Riley Act very explicitly says no, that's gone. Like we don't give a shit whether you're found guilty or not. If you're undocumented and you're even accused or suspected of committing a crime, that's enough to toss you in jail until we can deport you. The other thing that it did,
So
sorry,
essentially, almost everything that's going on is basically the foundation of what ICE is doing right now is based on the Lake and Riley Act,
yeah,
essentially.
the idea that they
They
can
can
stop
detain
you and
and
detain you on reasonable suspicion rather than probable cause, is straight out of Lake and Riley.
Got it.
Uh,
When was that
there,
passed again?
I think 23
Okay. So recently. So this was,
recently.
yep.
The other thing it does, which is a little more technical, but it is interesting constitutionally, is it gives the states the right to sue the federal government in order to force that detention of somebody. And normally, the federal government, we have a supremacy clause. The federal government's policies uh, outweigh the state's policies. But here, the Lake and Riley Act says, nope, Texas, if you don't like your Democratic president and you want to force that, and you don't like their immigration policies because they're not detaining people indefinitely, you can sue the government and force the federal government to do it the way you want it done, which is an interesting sort of flip of things
Yeah.
and probably
That
unconstitutional
probably.
in
That's,
a sane world. Yeah.
I was going to say, most everything that's happening right now is unconstitutional.
Yeah.
So, or was at least at one point until the Supreme Court just decided to all be racist. So,
Or it still is, and we just don't care.
yeah, yeah, fuck Clarence Thomas.
Yeah. So that's right. It's never a bad day to shit on Clarence Thomas.
That's the only reason I said that.
So the Lake and Riley Act is followed by the Big Beautiful Bill, which the biggest thing on that is the amount of funding that ICE and Border Patrol get to, particularly ICE, to build detention centers, to hire people, to arm themselves, and we now have ICE by itself is, I think, the 9th largest army in the world.
That's
Uh,
insane. And I didn't
yeah.
realize this. ICE was around before all of this started, right? Like before, like this year. I thought ICE was the formation of ICE was something that was newer, but apparently ICE has been around for a very long time. It was just far more strategic in its endeavors, and also wasn't that big. So for the most part, the people I've heard talk about ICE and local governments now that are coming out, they're like, yeah, we have a history of working really closely with ICE and hand in hand to extract criminals and people that are doing terrible things. And historically that relationship has actually been good. Like they come in, they have warrants, they've done their due diligence. We extract somebody that shouldn't be in the country, and it goes. This is just taking it to, because I'd never heard about it until all of this.
Yeah, the thing that is important also to understand about ICE as an agency, because ICE stands for Immigrations and Customs Enforcement. That's exactly what they do, and it's exactly what they're ostensibly limited to. They are not the police.
Yep.
Right? A police force is charged with generally upholding the laws of a municipality or state, or military police, whatever it may be. They are more like IRS enforcement, right? They are charged with enforcing immigration laws and immigration laws only. So in the past, you're exactly right. Places like Minneapolis, yeah, they're a sanctuary city, and there's sanctuary cities across the country. And what that means is a sanctuary city is one that says, basically, we're not going to work so closely with ICE. Every time we arrest someone, we're not going to run them through the immigration database. And in some cases, in lower level crimes, we're not going to turn them over. But almost every sanctuary city law has a carve out for serious crimes, where
Yeah.
if Minneapolis has someone who is, accused of murder and they're undocumented, yeah, Minneapolis would call up ICE and be like, "Yo, we got this guy. Here, come take him."
Yeah.
But if it's a speeder, if it's a traffic infraction, they're not running the immigration status of that person on the side of the road and calling up ICE and saying, "Hey, we caught this guy going 38 and a 30. Come get him."
Yep. That's dude, and what we're seeing now is different. So because recently the Supreme Court passed something now that they can even just directly racially profile, correct? Like you can just basically, if you're brown, you can get pulled over and questioned, uh, which also, like, and the Minnesota police chief was talking about this. His off-duty black and brown police officers are getting harassed by ICE all the time. And he's like, this isn't how this is supposed to be. And as a US citizen, we shouldn't be required to carry our IDs on us all the time. We shouldn't have to carry our documentation of citizenship. I mean, that's not something that I guess and maybe that's a privilege. Maybe that's something I should be. Maybe we do. But if I leave the house without my license, I'm not ever worried about it. I'm like, I don't have my license. Cool. But man, I this kind of stuff and then having it backed by Supreme Court, the Supreme Court decisions, it just kind of feels like we're heading in uh you know 1930s direction.
Yeah, I mean, there's a few things in there. One, like, not only should we not have to carry our papers, we don't have to carry our papers. There is no basis in law, in our history, or in the Constitution for any law enforcement to demand that we show our citizenship papers at a stop. That it's simply not a thing that we have to do,
Yeah.
and it's not a thing that people in most democratic countries have to do. By the way, like most countries at all don't have to do that. Um, the those stops you're talking about, that Supreme Court case you're talking about, which I'm almost positive was one of those shadow docket cases, so it didn't get a full hearing. We don't know what the
Elwyn's
reasoning
favorite.
was.
He loves the
Elvin's
shadow.
favorite.
He loves the
This
shadow
this
docket.
this one was written by Brett Kavanaugh. So there are some people on the left, and I think this should absolutely be the way we talk about these, who call these Kavanaugh stops, because he said that basically the color of your skin is enough reasonable suspicion to ask about immigration status. Like that's basically what he said. He's like, "Oh, I don't see a problem with that." And it's ludicrous. It's ludicrous. But yeah, you're right. It is backed by some sort of what should not have the weight of Supreme Court precedent, but does.
I hate it. I hate all of it. So, which is enough for me to say there. So, how does the big beautiful bill connect to all of this? Because the funding, I'm assuming we're going to talk funding here, because that was really that. I mean, what was it, like 150, like
150 billion
billion with a B?
billion.
That's insane.
Yeah.
That's insane.
Yeah, no, literally larger than the armies of all but 9 countries. It is the single largest law enforcement organization in the world. It's I don't think it's hyperbolic to look at this as just the creation of people use the word Gestapo. I'm not sure that that's wrong. It is a police force demanded by a particular administration, funded by a particular administration, carrying out the anti-constitutional, illegal, in most cases, biddings of a particular administration with wild amounts of money behind it, no training. The stories of what I've thought about becoming an ICE agent, because I was like, oh, they'll pay off my student loans. I'll get a $50,000 signing bonus, and I'll get paid like $200,000 a year.
Yeah.
It's a fucking hell of a deal, right? Like, we don't
But
have the
this is
money for teachers, but we got the money for that.
Well, and this is what's scary about this. This is I was having this conversation the other day, because if this is actually true, like what they're offering to pay a lot of these people, then like think about this in a broader sense of where our economy is going right now, right? So we have a bunch of stuff going down the drain. People are losing their jobs. A lot of people are unemployed, and a lot of companies are not hiring back. So then that entices that, oh, there is this high paying job that you can do. And the in essence, and this is something that's been scary for me to feel like the direction of our country is headed, is that if you tank the economy intentionally, then you make people reliant on government jobs. And if those are the only jobs to be had, and if those are the only jobs to be had, you control which jobs those are. And if those jobs become something like what ICE is doing, then we literally are repeating, the 1930s all over again. Like we're like I don't know, like this whole thing just from like the top to the bottom, and that is a little conspiracy theory-ish. I understand that, Elwyn, but
I
it
don't.
doesn't seem that far-fetched, if I'm being honest.
No, I don't. I don't think it's a conspiracy theory at all. My kids get tired of hearing me say this. Your choices reflect your priorities. right? So we are choosing to fund ICE to the tune of $150 billion. We are choosing to pay these people and to not vet them and to not train them. These are all policy choices that our government is making. And there's an opportunity cost for every one of those policy choices. What else could that $150 billion go to, right? We have this incredible debt deficit problem that we all talk about every now and then and think that the government gives a shit, but they don't. You know, could that go to shore up Social Security? Could that go to provide universal pre-K? Could that go to help Medicaid, shore up Medicaid and Medicare? These are all things that if we acknowledge that the government has said, we have $150 billion, we can find $150 billion, we can afford that. Now, there's a choice on what we're going to spend it on, which means that we're also making a choice about what we're not going to spend it on. And I think that's why, like, it's not a conspiracy theory. That's just we're showing our government is showing its priority, and its priority is fund this law enforcement organization and give them unfettered power.
Yeah. Because I mean, in general, it's kind of what it feels like, right? Like, okay, we started out the year with firing like everybody from federal jobs that they could possibly fire. And I'm curious about how many of those people got ICE recruiting emails later on, you know, shortly after their firings, depending on their demographic and capabilities. But, you know, like it makes me sad to kind of see the state of where we're at on all of this. But I thought there were some interesting statistics too around some of like I think part of what I've been hammering home about immigration and what matters to me the most and is that our country is still thrives on immigration. 40% of all Fortune 500 companies right now were founded by immigrants or their children. Most like a massive share, I think it's over 50% of scientists, doctors, of like the top level scientists, doctors, engineers, are foreign born. And that's because if you have high potential and you live in another country, oftentimes you apply to our schools. So they come over, and oftentimes, a lot of times, their parents are well off. So these are people that are coming in using our schools, but they're also paying out of country tuition. So they're paying an exorbitant amount for tuition to be in our country. And then on top of that, they're starting businesses that employ American people shortly after like they're finished with school here. And I'm like, man, immigration is still, you know, we would not have Silicon Valley without immigration. Like we would not have any of the technology that we're using at our fingertips if we hadn't have allowed immigration to happen. There's so much. And furthermore, even I was reading this week as well. A lot of cities that they're like smaller cities that are starting to like degrade and erode, uh going into economic hardships. I didn't realize this, but historically immigrants have revitalized a lot of smaller cities throughout our country because they'll end up going to those places because of cheap housing, and they're in places that other people don't want to live. They start small businesses and they end up creating a community and culture around it. And it's happened in places in, you know, in Texas, Michigan. I was reading a bunch about it this week, like some of these small towns where immigrants have basically just revitalized the entire town at some point. So I'm like, man, there is a lot of, there's so much good that goes along with this that doesn't get talked about outside of, you know, like the handful of like egregious crimes, which is we also neglect. Dude, I'm married to a woman that has watched every crime show on television, true crime television TV show. And I will tell you right now, the majority of crime is done, the majority of like terrible crime is done by lonely white dudes. Lonely white dudes are the scariest fucking human beings on the face of the planet. Those are the dudes that are out there eating people, like dressing in costumes and killing children. Like these are the dudes that are actually like doing the shit that we're all like should be terrified of, the stuff that's made of nightmares, like the immigrants that are running drugs across the country to make a living. Yeah, that's not great. But the stuff that's like you're terrified of your kid landing in somebody's hands, that's some fucking lonely white guy somewhere in like the Midwest. So
It puts the lotion in the basket. Uh, I think
were you holding that the whole time?
I was absolutely. The you're absolutely right, and every study that's done on this kind of always comes out on the side that immigration is not a small but a pretty significant net economic good for a country that welcomes in people on student visas, on H-1B work visas. Immigrants as a population, undocumented immigrants as a population, commit fewer crimes. They pay their taxes. They are, by and large, more law-abiding members of society than everybody else. And with Laken Riley, what everybody said was one crime like this is one too many. Yes, sure, absolutely. It is also one crime too many when a school gets shot up by a crazy white guy. It's also one crime too many when an ICE officer shoots a woman in the fucking face. Okay? All these unnecessary deaths are one too many. It doesn't make it different that the guy was undocumented or the woman was a white blonde girl. Yes, of course it's one too many. Hold everybody and everything to that same standard, and pass some fucking gun control or rein in ICE, because otherwise it's not one too many. One murder like this is one too many. It's that we don't like the guy who did it, so we're gonna
that
now punish an entire class of people.
That's the part of it is killing me, because it's like, oh, I'm gonna be up in arms watching Fox News about this brown guy that killed this girl, and then I'm gonna flip over to the Jeffrey Dahmer special and eat popcorn and ice cream while I watch this dude eat other people. Like,
Yeah.
the irony is not lost on me, and I just think that people like we're fed so much garbage nowadays on like the statistical and the fear mongering behind what immigration actually is. And look, I am pro like not having open borders. Like I think most liberals would say that. I like James Tellerico kind of said it the other day on the Ezra Klein podcast. He's like, look, we want to have our immigration policy should be like a front porch. We have a giant welcome sign, but the front door is also locked. Like you've and that was kind of to me like a great picture of, yeah, like we want people coming into this country. We want people doing the jobs that we don't want to always do. We want the best and brightest throughout the world to innovate technology and to share that. And we've created the platform and the ability historically for people to do that here. Like, dude, the hardest part about all this to me, and I remember this like growing up in Utah, I asked myself so many times because I wasn't Mormon and I often felt like I didn't belong there. So as soon as I turned 18, what did I do? I trucked it to California because I was like, I couldn't get out of there fast enough. And the truth is we don't control where we're born. Like, dude, these people that are born in other parts of the country, in Mexico, in poverty, or in Africa, and a lot of these other places, the Middle East, wherever anybody's coming from that's trying to build a better life for themselves, they didn't choose the life that they have. Like we're just born into this. And the fact that is lost on so many people, and they're demonized for wanting to build a better life for their family and come to our country and do jobs that you don't want to do, because their kids might have a better opportunity because of that. That is one of the most noble things I think you can do on the face of the planet. A single
Yeah, I
mother
think
walking across a border with 3 kids to work as a maid for her life so her kids can grow up here and go to school here. Dude, there's nothing more heroic to me than that in this world.
yeah, I think there is a certain humanity that makes a good immigration policy. Like there's people who are, English needs to be a national language. There's a gazillion families I know where the parents or grandparents still speak Chinese or Korean or Spanish, and their kids and grandkids are successful and are, going to help provide growth and stability in their communities. But we're not doing that, right? Like the immigration debate is what's why it's in the news every day, and I really hope that people keep this in mind when it comes time to vote, is now it's just being used to justify all sorts of,
Racism.
uncon racism, unconstitutional bullshit. There was a memo that leaked out yesterday. There was a whistleblower who leaked out a memo where ICE is saying that their agents have the right to break in the door of a house based on the existence of an administrative warrant rather than a judicial warrant. What that means is that an administrative warrant is signed by the executive branch, by DHS. Okay, they say, hey, we believe this guy is in this house and he's here in an undocumented manner. Go, you can kick in the door and grab him, right? That's unconstitutional. That shit is against the Fourth Amendment. Okay, by the Fourth Amendment, again, everybody living here has the protections of the Fourth Amendment. Says that warrant, that application has to go to a judge, and if you have a judicial warrant, now maybe you can kick in the door depending on how dangerous you think the person is. It's a basic checks and balance function of the Constitution that our immigration issue right now is being used to end run.
Yep.
And it's lost at all this perspective that no, these folks by and large undocumented are by and large good people.
Yep.
Yes, there are people who commit crimes among them. And, but that's the same for everything. And we're not helping ourselves. We're losing researchers now. We're losing students. Colleges are going and universities are going to lose money. We're now behind China in the amount of research university scientists that are living in the country. We lose with a sort of blind, militarized immigration enforcement policy rather than one that is like Talarico said, like, hey, come, make an application, and we're going to use humane criteria to judge that application. And it's really simple to say online in a
Yeah.
podcast, much, much harder when you're dealing with hundreds of thousands of people.
Yeah.
Okay, I acknowledge that. But again, our choices reflect our priorities.
Yeah.
And what made this country great, from its founding was this idea that we would welcome people from other countries, that we did offer a brighter promise and a better future for you and for your family. And people took us up on it, and it worked.
Yep.
And it worked.
So do you
And
think that there's anything good about is there anything good that you can pull out of what's happening now with immigration and ICE? Like
no, I mean, really, like honestly, Trump, there are far fewer border crossings, and
sure.
that's probably a good thing. But like in terms of just net effect on us as a country, net effect on our psyche, on the fabric of our society, on our standing in the world at large, no, all around, it's a disaster.
Yeah. We'll kind of wrap this here, but I was thinking I was listening to what was her name? I can't remember her name at the moment, but she was talking about how ICE specifically right now is targeting smaller sanctuary cities because the show of force. So, which is was interesting to me to kind of wrap my head around, like the reason that they've decided to start staying out of like places like Chicago and New York is because, the force back is far larger. Like what's going Minnesota, you might be able to control people a little bit more, and they want to normalize this. They want to normalize because if they can normalize it and get people scared going through small cities, then that allows them to start going through the bigger cities with less pushback. And I think it's critical that people are protesting. I think it's critical that people are standing up for their rights around every turn. And I hope that the people that, like, for us, where it's not happening as much right in our face, that, we're finding ways to support and, help those communities protect their own, like, again, I'm not saying like we need to protect illegal immigrants that are doing shady stuff in our country, but I'm saying like we need to protect the integrity of our communities and, the people that are here that are contributing to a society that are trying to build a better life for themselves. We want them. Like
We need to
the
protect who we are as a country.
yes,
What do we want this country to be? What has it always been? What's worked? Honestly, what hasn't worked, open borders have not worked, right?
yeah,
Cool. But yeah, we absolutely, the protests, despite, my feelings about going into a church, which again are optical, are optics based, but yeah, I think you're absolutely right. We should be standing up and protesting. We should be doing what we can to say, no, this is wrong. This is not, and it's not even about immigration, right? Like 14% of all illegal immigrants live in Texas and Florida. 1% live in Minnesota.
yeah.
We
And
live
now
in
that,
Texas. Guess what? I don't see.
yeah, guess where they're headed now? Maine. Like,
Hotbed. Hotbed.
right, that's just where you would expect them to all of the terrible like gun militias, they're like, yeah, we also like to fish, so we're gonna roll up here. So
I'll tell you, like, oddly enough, though, the primary immigrant communities in Maine, I think, are African as well, and in Minneapolis, it's Somalians. And I do kind of wonder, like, why are all these people from Africa going to fucking Maine and Minnesota?
it is kind of odd.
Yeah, I'm
Like,
not sure I've tracked that. Like, how
yeah.
about Arizona?
Yeah, I was gonna say there's some areas of the U.S. that have probably better climates for you, or maybe they're just like, look, we grew up in the heat and we want out, so we're gonna deal with cold. Although 1 year in cold, and I'm like, that's enough. I'm good. I don't ever need to do this again. So, all right, Ellen, who we telling to shut the fuck up today?
All right, we are telling. So, by the way, worth noting, "Shut the fuck up" is not really about someone shouldn't speak. They don't have the right to speak. Everybody has the right to speak. It's more about pausing for a moment, reflecting, and filling that void while you're reflecting with what are my values. Some thought about what are my values, and is what I'm about to say consistent with my value proposition. And I want to make sure that I honor that in this one because it might toe the line a little bit.
Yeah,
Because what I want to tell the shut the fuck up is every Cybertruck driving Elon Musk Doge fanboy out there who
I
thinks that
I'm so pro this one. I'm in with you on this one.
so, came out yesterday that, hey, guess what? Fucking Doge took social security information of almost all Americans and handed it out to Stop the Steal advocacy groups and God knows where else. This came out in a court filing. So they were required to do it. And, you know, this is the most predictable thing in the world. This was something that we were talking about when it was happening. Okay. And what drives me crazy about it, and we've touched on this, I touch on this in my mind all the time. The MAGA guys, if you're, I'm going to stereotype here. If you're buying a Cybertruck, okay, I'm very quickly going to make a couple of assumptions about you. You own a MAGA hat, okay? You own multiple guns. You love the Second Amendment. And sometime during the summer of 2020, you were telling your friends how if the government ever came from you, they could pry your guns from your cold, dead hands, and how government intrusion on your life was the worst fucking thing that could ever happen. Okay? Your guy has perpetrated the single largest government intrusion on our personal data, probably in the history of the world. Okay, and I'm happy Cybertruck sales are shit. Okay, but there needs to be just a general backlash amongst that group of people and recognition and acknowledgement that no, all these things that we were afraid of are happening. So if you're in your Cybertruck and you're listening to InfoWars and Alex Jones, and they're telling you all the terrible shit that the Somalians in Minnesota are doing, and all the reasons why it's okay to have jackbooted agents of the state taking 5-year-old kids and shipping them across the country, pepper spraying a guy who's down on the ground held by 3 guys, and beating the shit out of a guy in a fucking fox mask who's dancing on a sidewalk. This actually happened. If you're listening to that and you're going, yes, fuck those people, I hate government, fuck those people, you really need to shut the fuck up, okay? Because your fear of government intrusion into your life is happening, and it's happening at the hands of your guys, of the same people who you're cheering on beating up civilians. And you got to square that circle. You got to square that circle. Either you are for big, powerful government that can do whatever they want, physically or with data, or you are for individual rights, the right to protest, the right to not have your data sold off to Peter Thiel or whoever the fuck it is. But you cannot be both. And if you can't square that circle, you got to shut the fuck up for a second. The soundproofing on those trucks is great. Okay? Shut the fuck up for a second. Look
The
at your
side
red
panel is
hat.
not.
Yeah. Look at your MAGA hat and decide, does the values of that MAGA hat match your "Don't Tread on Me" flag from early Obama eras and the Tea Party? Because I think they probably don't match, and we need that alignment. Otherwise, and you need to reflect, fill that space, and square the circle. And when you do, find me and explain to me how you did it, because I actually really want to know.
There we go. Fist bump it. This actually works as a double because we do the same thing. Whenever we see a Cybertruck in my family while we're driving, we scream trash can and punch each other. So the first one to spot it gets to yell trash can and hit somebody else. It's the new version of Slug Bug from when I was growing up. So yeah.
I like when I see a Confederate flag sign or like a 3%ers sign on a windshield. I'm like, hey kids, a racist. Want to see a racist?
Well, what are we talking about next week, Elwyn?
Do you want to go? We've been kicking around gerrymandering, but I'm not sure the time is completely right.
That'll probably be a little more relevant as we get closer to the midterms. So,
yeah.
What
but
you think?
I thought sort of age limits and capacity for public officials might be a good one to revisit, since we got Donald Trump's brains miraculously are not falling out of his ears at this point.
I am game. I had a couple others that I'll write down this week too, but let's plan on age limits, because that is something that I am since we started this podcast, I have grown increasingly more advocate. I don't even know how to say that. Become more of an advocate for. So it is a crucial. I think it's a crucial thing. So yeah, that'll be a fun conversation. So next week. Tune in, y'all.
I will not be furious at Chuck Schumer for the entire conversation. I probably will be.
I will be too. All right.